We have called us to govern this province. We ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interest of our people. Almachtige God, ons bid dat u gedrende ons vergadrings. Ons dienende wysheid sal gee en ons motiewe suiwer sal hou. En dat u ons sal help om ons tekortkominge te oorkom. En al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikelela Nkosi ilizwe lethu nabantu balo. Umisele ukulunga Nkosi kwiphondo lethu. Nkosi sikelela iAfrika. Gcina abantwana bayo. Khokhela Nkosi inkokheli zayo. Inike uxolo Nkosi iAfrika. All this we beg in your most holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, honorable members. You are already seated. I'm going to, at this stage, read the some opening remarks for us to understand what are the provisions set out by the Speaker in order to enable us to perform our duties as honorable members. And I trust that everybody has been connected to participate in this historic first sitting of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament in terms of Rule 1A of the Standing Rules, with all our members in remote attendance by electronic means. Since the announcement by the President, Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa, of the measures to contain the COVID-19 pandemic, the WCPP has been fully operational, with the members doing their constituency work to assist the general public in whatever way possible, as well as our committees playing their oversight role in an effective, efficient, and transparent manner. Our sitting today will be conducted in terms of the standing rules and directives issued by me on the 17th April 2020. Honorable members, allow me to highlight some of the important directives in this regard. The Secretary and his administration will ensure dedicated technical support at all times during this sitting. The quorum requirements for the sitting of the House are as provided for in the Constitution and the standing rules. Unless there is an indication of unanimous concurrence, voting will take place by members present and entitled to vote in order to cast their votes by clearly identifying themselves to the presiding officer. They will do so verbally, expressing their votes. Members who are present have all the privileges and immunities imparted by the law. This is the House of Parliament. Members who are considered to be out of order by the presiding officer, myself in this case, that will then mean that the microphones will be muted and called to order. Attendance of members will be recorded by the Sergeant at Arms. In instances where these directives, honorable members, do not cover a particular eventuality, the standing rules will apply. In instances where the rules cannot be applied, the ruling by the presiding officer is final. Members, honorable members, all microphones have been muted. You are requested to only unmute your microphone when you intend to raise a point of order in terms of the standing rules. You should then first state your name and your surname in order for the presiding officer to recognize you. When you speak, please ensure that your mic is unmuted. And when you are, of course, done speaking, please mute your microphone in order to allow other members to speak. Honorable members, I have invited the media and hoping that the work of the media will be made easier by them having access in this MS Teams meeting as guests of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. Members of the press may, however, not use the chat room, speak or activate their cameras while sitting in the gallery, because this is a sitting of Parliament in session, as we would do if we were physical in the House in the WCPP in Wales Street. For the purpose of this sitting, and as this is our first sitting of the House via Microsoft Teams, I am requesting that honorable members be sensitive to the language, because we at this stage do not have all the interpretation as we would otherwise have, and that members at least allow us to at this stage use one language that we can all use to communicate. The Secretary will explore options for translations for the future, so that the sittings of the House continue as per normal in terms of the language that we use. And we do apologize in this regard, and I do hope that members have forgiven me. At this point, honorable members, I wish to welcome you and wish you the best of luck with the sitting, and say to all of us, the new normal has arrived, and I hope that we are all able to embrace it and move on with the times. Thank you very much, honorable members. I now recognize the Chief Whip.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I move without notice that notwithstanding the provisions of the relevant standing rules, questions to the Premier without notice and members' statements, that being the only scheduled business of the House, will take precedence on Thursday, the 23rd of April, 2020. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable the Chief Whip. Are there any members who wish to object to the motion by the Chief Whip? No objections? Agreed to. Honorable Chief Whip, I recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move without notice that the House ratifies the decision by the Speaker for the establishment of the ad hoc committee announced on the 14th of April 2020 as contemplated in Rule 119.2 of the Standing Rules. I so move.
Thank you very much, Honorable the Chief Whip. Honorable members, are there any objections to the Chief Whip having read the motion? No objections. Thank you, honorable members. The motion is carried. Thank you, Chief Whip. Honorable members, I would like to, of course, that Honorable Mackenzie.
Yes, Honorable Speaker. I just received a tweet from a journalist. Thank you. I just received a tweet from a journalist saying the link Parliament sent them to join MS Team is not working, and if you can urgently address the matter, please.
Thank you, Honorable Member Mackenzie. That matter will be attended to by the administration. Our technical team is on standby. They are going to help them now. Apologies to the media for that. I think on that point, it's also important to...
Point of order.
Yes, Honorable Member, will you please identify yourself?
It's Member Dugmore, Speaker.
Yes, yes, Honorable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Speaker, could I ask you consider, in the light of Honorable Mackenzie's request, that we actually don't formally start until there's a link up. I think there's a lot of interest in this first session, And if we simply proceed and the public and the media is not able to follow, I'm not sure what the problem is, if it's the YouTube link which is a problem, or if there are journalists who are trying to get onto the Microsoft. So if you could clarify that, my main interest is the members of the public. So if the YouTube is working, then obviously you would use your discretion to make a decision. But I think it would be a pity if anyone was excluded and we simply proceeded. I so move, Speaker.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable the Leader of the Opposition. I do not know why the link on YouTube is not working, but the members of the media.
The link on YouTube, sorry, Honorable Speaker.
Please take your seat, Honorable Mackenzie. Let me proceed. I'll recognize you shortly. I'm just responding on the point raised by Honorable Dagmo. There are two invites. One is through the open one on YouTube, so that all members of the public have access to what we are doing here in the House. The second one was to extend an invitation to accommodate the media as guests, as would otherwise do here in the gallery in the House. So both of those should be working. So I just want to get the feedback from the IT team why any of those is not functional as it should. Can I get an indication that all members are in the House? I'm sure. I'm here now. I see now that Honorable Dagmo is saying that it is working. Now I recognize Honorable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. It's not the link on YouTube. YouTube is working. The link for members of the media to join MS Team, that's the one that's not working.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mackenzie. The IT will attend to that, but members of the media for now can follow the YouTube whilst they're trying to connect. May we please proceed? Are we all ready?
Speaker, on a point of correction.
Yes, sir. Who's that?
Honorable Maran.
Honorable Maran, I recognize you, sir.
Speaker, just one correction. It's not the leader of the opposition. It's leader of the official opposition.
Thank you very much, Honorable Maran. We can rewrite the rules of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. Currently they say leader of the opposition, but I would like to recognize the Honorable Dagmo as the leader of the official opposition. I'm at no qualms with that. In fact, I ordinarily call him that, but thank you, sir.
Thanks.
That point has been carried, no problem. May we please proceed? We've got the next order, which in this case, we have the questions to the Honorable the Premier without notice in terms of Rule 202. I would like to recognize the honorable members. I'm just going to read the list of the members who will participate in asking the questions to the Premier. But I want to make this right. I want to make this righter. We have 20 minutes to do to ask questions to the Premier, and I have 7 members, 6 members that would like to ask questions. And it's Honorable Said, Honorable Bota, Honorable Bosman, Honorable Heron, Honorable Dagmo, and Honorable Murray. As we all know, in these 20 minutes, it's also important that the Premier gets the opportunity to respond to each member that is asking the question. So it's up to the first members to help the Premier in ensuring that at least he is able to respond, but also as many members are able to ask the question. So I'm asking that we please be circumspect of time and not to ask a question and belabor the point that you want to raise. Just be as prompt and concise as possible. Thank you very much. I now recognize Honorable Said. Honorable Said. Why is Honorable Said unable to join?
Oh no, sorry. Do you hear me, Speaker?
Yes, you are live, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Speaker. Thank you very much, Speaker. Can the Honourable Premier perhaps shed more light on the constructive role played by the opposition parties in the Western Cape and what it entails during this period of COVID-19?
Thank you, Honorable Said. Honorable Premier, I recognize you, sir.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and congratulations, first of all, on this first e-Parliament. I think it's really great news, and thank you very much to the Honourable Said for the question. I think obviously this COVID-19 virus that we're dealing with across the world and in this country is something that's new to all of us, and it allows for the first of many, many things. I must say that I think so far being involved in this pandemic from a provincial government point of view, I've seen more spheres of government working together than I had seen before. And can I also say that I think between opposition parties as well, I know that right in the very beginning, a fair number of calls backwards and forwards from the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, especially saying how do we get access to link up to our joint operations commands across the province. I think right down to, and unfortunately we couldn't have it last night, but the Leader of the Opposition asked for a meeting that we have an update or a direct meeting between myself and the leaders of the political parties. And of course, at the end of the day, I think fighting this virus is something that everyone is calling for, everyone in society to play their role. It doesn't matter, whether you are in government or in opposition, or it's government and civil society, NGOs. We are all doing this together. We've all got to pull together to get through this pandemic. We know that specifically from the data put on the table by our medical specialists and our medical team, that we are going to have a very tough time going forward. And I think the only way we're going to get through this is if we find ways that we can work together.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. Honourable Said, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, Speaker, I do have a follow-up question. What in the Premier's experience then is the result of this form of co-governance on determining policy and operational matters? Speaker, thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Said. I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I think we must be careful not to call the word co-governance, because then we all take full responsibility for everything. I think, obviously the government has to take responsibility for the decisions made. So it's not necessarily co-governance, but I think it's about how do we find ways in which we can tackle issues together. How do we find ways that, we perhaps don't follow the normal, adversary space, because, we're all learning as we're going. This is something that's not a perfect science, and it is something that as we move through, I think back to our first positive case that we had in Khayelitsha, and I remember there was issues raised, people trying to make sure that we got quarantined for the individual who tested positive, and I think at the end of the day everything worked out well. But we also know that we were working together to try and find the best solution. So, obviously we still have to take responsibility as the executive and as government in this province, but we can also definitely find ways in which we can work together to find solutions that's in the best interest of the public of this province.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. Thank you, Honourable Said. I now recognize the Honourable Potter.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My question to the Premier. Premier, there is unprecedented strain on our healthcare systems at this time. In terms of ongoing medical care, such as distribution of chronic medication to patients, what are the current challenges and how are these being dealt with moving forward?
Thank you, Honourable Porter. I now recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Obviously, I think chronic meds was an issue that was sort of picked up by the Department of Health. I won't have all the exact stats and data on me, but we have around about 700,000 chronic medical patients in our province. And even before we started the lockdown, the health department started running programs both with delivery companies. I know that they worked with Uber. I know that they were looking at some other delivery mechanisms. Even the community health workers were delivering chronic meds to people rather than having to help. And then, Speaker, I think someone's mic's not muted, but rather than come to our health facility.
Honourable Premier, please take your seat. Honourable members, may I please request that those honourable members who are not speaking, please switch off your video, turn your video off, and also switch off your mic by just clicking on it. It's going to unmute, which is you won't be able to hear you when you're making your tea and coffee at home. May we please do that? I don't want to name the members, but please just switch off the video so that we don't see your nice home there, because we're gonna want to encourage us to go and come for coffee in your household. May we please request the Premier to proceed? Premier, please proceed.
Speaker, can I raise a point of order, Speaker?
Of course, member.
Speaker, I just noted that I only asked one follow-up question, Speaker. I'm entitled to 2 follow-up questions, Speaker, as per the rules. So, Speaker, I was wondering if, do I wait until the Premier is done responding, or can I do my follow-up question now, Speaker?
I thought you were done, Honourable Said. May we please request the Premier to proceed responding? And then after the Honourable Porter is concluded, then I'm going to ask you to ask that question, a follow-up question.
Thank you, Speaker.
You are most welcome, Honourable Said. Honourable Premier, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Speaker. So as I said, I don't know, I don't think we've got to all 700,000. I think that would have been way too big a call in this short period of time. But I do know that many of our chronic patients were receiving their meds and they were giving them 2-month supply. So that really helps specifically around the lockdown. And I also think what's going to happen here is innovation is going to happen and we're going to find better ways of getting meds to people. And I know that that in the first report that I saw on it, that the health department were looking specifically at our vulnerable communities to protect them. And this is one of those programs that protects the vulnerable community. Whether you're aged or you have lung disorders, TB, etc., that you would have been, our first protection. So how do we get your meds to you so that you don't have to leave your home? And, this is really important so that we really do protect society.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. I now recognize Honourable Porter, your first follow-up question.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Speaker, through you to the Premier. Premier, how have the volunteer health professionals supported with the pressure on the healthcare system during this current status or crisis, rather? Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank you, Honourable Porter. Honourable Premier.
I didn't get, did you say volunteers or healthcare professionals?
Honourable Premier, please take your
Premier,
seat.
I said volunteer.
Honourable Porter, I recognize you.
Okay.
Thank you, Speaker. Premier, if I can just put you the question again. How have volunteer health professionals supported with the pressure on the healthcare system during this current crisis that we are in?
Thank you, Honourable Porter. Honourable Premier.
So obviously with the volunteers, we haven't really started to use our volunteers, but we've got a call out for them. We've got well over 1,000 healthcare volunteers that have already put their names forward. And I think as people are starting to gather from the information that our health department's putting out and our modelers on our scenario planning, we obviously are asking for volunteers to come and help us. And we will be calling on their services as we build out extra hospital beds, as we build out more capacity to deal with that peak that's going to come in sort of July, August, when we know that we're going to need every single person. And then, of course, it's also making sure that we've got sufficient medical supplies to help protect not only our 14,000 health workers, but also the volunteers that are added. And we keep on monitoring our stocks. You know, you hear it all around the world. It's the PPE stocks that are always under pressure. And if you don't have adequate PPE, you can't protect your front line. And of course, when you're fighting a virus like this, healthcare professionals we need to make sure that they are very well protected. And I think as Minister Mbombo will tell you, or Dr. Keith Kluti, the head of department, you know, it's something that we really are serious about. We, as of our last report, we had 44 million rands worth of PPE in stock, and we've got another 185 million rand on order, so that we are trying to stay ahead of the curve and prepare for what we know is coming at us. And I think that's the whole reason for lockdown, which is gives us that opportunity to get prepared.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. Honorable Botha, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, Speaker.
Okay.
Can I proceed?
Please proceed, Honorable Botha.
Premier, any significant strategies and lessons that emerge from dealing with the challenges in response to the COVID-19 pandemic that the provincial government will be taking forward?
Honorable Premier.
Thank you very much. I think one thing about this virus in South Africa, I think we are lucky in a way, because a lot of lessons are being learnt on our behalf in other parts of the world. So we definitely take that into the mix when we're doing our work. And I think also being aware that obviously we are also a unique environment. We know that in parts of the world, it's the elderly that have been the most vulnerable. Obviously, our elderly are, but we have a younger population, so that probably gives us an advantage. Although we're not too sure the implications of the vulnerable in our society, specifically those that are HIV positive or have TB. We know we have a large number of TB patients in our region, or TB sufferers. Any other lung disorder, we do know that does put people definitely on the back foot. But I think also we're learning every single day. We are learning. Our strategies are changing as we're learning, because we can apply what we are seeing in other parts of the world, but also our own current work that we're doing. And so I think it's still early days for us. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that we do have some advantages, and I think we're also going to be helping other parts of the world with some of the stuff that we're doing.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. I now recognize Honorable Sayed.
Thank you so much, Speaker. Would the Premier concede that he and his government is better guided by taking the views and suggestions of the opposition parties on board, as is the case in the collective response to the COVID-19 to the COVID-19 crisis, than following a narrow party line that we have seen at some stage? One group of the party, which at the National Parliamentary Caucus leadership have followed, and certain individuals in the city of Cape Town have followed. But I mean, would the Premier then also ask mayors in municipalities, for example, to follow the line that he's been following? Because we must commend the Premier for his particular approach that he's been following in this province regarding the crisis. But I think he needs to encourage, would he be encouraging his MECs and mayors in different municipalities to follow the same line? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Said. I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Order, Speaker. Point of order, Speaker.
What's the point of order? Will you please identify yourself, Honourable Member?
Danville Smith speaking.
I recognize you, Honourable Smith. What's your point of order?
Speaker, while the Honourable Said was speaking, we noticed that the mics of members was on, whilst you made a ruling that the mics must be off and only switch on when a member has a point of order.
Thank you, Honourable Smith. That's a valid point of order, and thank you very much for your assistance. May I please request
point of order? Further point of order?
Wait, Honourable Member, I'm on the floor.
Okay.
May I please request the Honourable Members, the Speaker made the ruling right from the outset that we recognize the rules as set out by the Speaker, that when there's a member that is on the floor, no matter how exciting the point that the member is making, please keep your mic off, because we are in an online virtual platform. So it's not as easy as when you can make all those interjections in the House. So let us just cooperate. And I'm going to make that suggestion humbly so. Now I recognize Honourable Dagmo, you have a point to raise, Honourable Member, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My point of order is that in regard to the point of order raised by Honourable Member Danville Smith, where you have ruled, I think the other concern which I would request you to rule on is not only was a particular Honourable Member's microphone on, but that particular Honourable Member actually laughed in a contemptuous manner when Member Syed was trying to get his third question across, follow-up question. So I think it's completely against the spirit of what we're trying to achieve here. Firstly, as you've ruled that particular member had their mic on, and then secondly, all of us could hear this contemptuous laughter, almost derisory laughter, which I think goes against the very spirit with which you opened this meeting with, and in which the Premier also congratulated the Speaker for actually convening this. So I would like you to please make a ruling also on the contemptuous, derisory laughter by a particular member who at this point is probably unidentified, but maybe they can just own up. Maybe they can actually say that I apologize for doing that.
Point of order, Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition. You are assisting there. I would not want to entertain any other point of order. The Premier is on the floor, and he is responding to the question by the member. And we're doing an injustice to Honourable Said and to the Honourable Premier, and most importantly to the people of the province. Let us please cooperate and work together in achieving what we sought to achieve here. Honourable Premier.
Speaker, can you recognize me? I'm raising a point of order, please.
Is that on the same matter or a different point of order?
Yes, on the same matter.
All right. I hope you'll forgive me, Honourable the Leader of the Honourable the LOGB. Please come through, Honourable LOGB. I recognize you.
Speaker, this is a normal sitting of Parliament, even though it's happening under abnormal conditions. We can't then change the rules as at a whim. Interjections are allowed in the House, and we are in the sitting, and therefore I do not agree with any view that the interjection in the normal sitting, even though the conditions under which we are convening this Parliament are different. So I think, Speaker, we must be careful of making new rules just because the manner in which the sitting is conducted is not the normal way of conducting the sitting.
Thank you, Honourable Matigizela and the Leader of Government Business. Unfortunately, the Speaker had tabled a special set of rules in terms of Rule 1 of the Standing Rules, which obviously makes provision for the virtual platform, virtual meetings like this. And that has just been adopted by the House, where the Chief Whip read the motion and the House adopted it unanimously, just to reaffirm the tabling of the rules, which was done on the 8th. And then subsequently the terms of reference on the 17th of April. This is not a normal House of Parliament, as you have already indicated. But what is abnormal, what is normal about it is that we're all here as members of Parliament. Unfortunately, interjections that will disrupt this platform will simply lead to collapsing this meeting. So your point does not carry. And that point, if we allow that point, it will be tantamount to collapsing this meeting, and therefore we cannot move on those bases. May I please proceed, Honourable Premier?
Thank you very much, Speaker. I noticed those points of order, and I noticed the question, and I must say that I didn't laugh, but I did smile. Because obviously there was a little sting in the tail about the National Assembly and the opposition there, as well as the City of Cape Town. But I also want to say that, obviously the line of questioning from the Honourable Said was about how do we do this together. And I think our Cabinet and our government has been very serious on how we get this right together, because it is every one of our responsibility. I think and what really illustrates it is going to be our modelling that we've put on the table, our scenario planning that says that in actual fact in this province, we are showing that we've got 1,000 beds of our critical care, 1,000 beds too few, and our ICU beds, we've got 750 beds too few. Now we can make up the 1,000 beds. In actual fact, we're going to put 1,300 in to play safe, but we're not able to make up the 750 shortfall. And there's only one way that we are going to make sure that we don't get into that space where people are going to be lining up waiting for ICU beds, and that is that we all work together. All parties, the whole of society, we have to be the whole of society taking this on. And of course, there will be oversight and there will be politics here and there, but we've got to try and do it in the most constructive way possible, because that's the only way that we are going to save lives when it gets to July, August, end of July, beginning of August, and we reach the peak of this pandemic. And we will only save lives if we do it together, because we've all got to make sure that we understand that risk. And we're going to be opening up some of the economy. And if we see it starting to get away from us, we're going to have to close it down again. And the one thing, Minister Mbombo and myself, the President, you can see the narrative we'll hear tonight as to whether we have, or how much competency we have to make sure that we can also slow down to protect as much as possible the system that we've put in place. We've got time to prepare for it, but we also must understand their limitations to that, and we can only do it if we do it together.
Thank you, Honourable Premier, and Honourable Said, and Honourable Botha. Now I recognize Honourable Bosman. Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition, will you please switch off your video?
Good afternoon, Speaker. Good afternoon, Premier and colleagues. Speaker, through you, Mr. Premier, the COVID-19 pandemic is a global threat, not just to food security, but particularly to food security for vulnerable communities, including children. These children have previously relied on feeding schemes. Can you perhaps tell the House how many children have been fed in the Western Cape through the operating feeding schemes during the COVID-19 crisis?
Thank you, Honourable Bosman. I recognize the Premier.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and to the Honourable Bosman. Thank you for that question. Obviously, we can see it now in the system that food security, as we move into, further deeper into the lockdown period, that food security is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. It's children, yes, but children are also seen in our mix as part of the solution. When we could see that we were running into trouble 2 weeks ago, we very quickly reactivated our school feeding schemes, as well as added to the Department of Social Development's programs. So at the moment, we're feeding through our ECD system, we're feeding 50 to 60,000 children every single day. And we can feed up to 82,000 learners, nearly 500,000 learners through our school feeding schemes. So we reactivated that. We probably averaging only about 100,000 at the moment, because many learners are not able to get to their school, or even some schools haven't managed to get it up and running yet. But we are busy rolling it out. I think we're sitting at around about 300 schools at the moment. And, obviously, every single time you run a program, you've got to also take into consideration that there are risks. And I know that there's been fair discussion at a national level around food, and specifically for the most vulnerable. And of course, we take children into that space. So it's learners and early childhood development programs that we have, as well as our call center. So, that's where we're at the moment. We've also put 50,000 food parcels into the system, and the Social Development Department is in the lead, but they are taking all of this together, and a report should come to Cabinet on how we are mapping the food shortages and the food supply, because it's not only just us in the province, there's national government, there's provincial government and local government, as well as the NGOs, and then also even beyond the NGOs, there's so many churches and mosques and just community organizations that are feeding. But we also know that runs with a risk. So, this is a fine balance, and we're trying to map it along with our call center. 14,500 calls on average at our call center as we built up. In the beginning, it was crashing because we couldn't manage all the calls. We've got about 100 extra volunteers into the system, and about 90 call center operators. And so I think we're now getting a better handle on it, but we should get a full presentation tomorrow at Cabinet, and I think that presentation will be given to the ad hoc committee in the afternoon.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. That concludes the questions to the Premier without notice. The time has just ended. I'm sorry, Honourable Premier and Honourable Bosman.
Premier, point of order.
Honourable Marais, what's your point of order?
Our point of order that this thing has been so arranged that only the DA will speak, and they are so long-winded and they ask sweetheart questions, which I think this is becoming a farce. This technology by which we ask questions becoming the biggest farce I've ever seen.
Thank you, Honourable Marais. That is not a point of order. Respectfully, it's a frivolous point of order. Point of order, Honourable Marais. We follow the rules in terms of who must speak and how and when they should speak. I now recognize, in fact, we are now moving to member statement, and there will be 2 minutes for each member, and I now recognize the Democratic Alliance.
Honourable Speaker, the outbreak of the coronavirus has disrupted our lives since the 11th of March 2020 and will continue to tremendously change our lives on a daily basis. Indeed, we face unprecedented times in which we must all adjust and adapt to the rapidly altered circumstances we face. This pandemic has forced us to not only look at things differently, but to do things differently. Our lives will never again be business as usual. The status quo of the past is no longer an option. We have seen a significant escalation of government services, including an improvement of public service announcements that reach every corner of this province. We have also turned our focus on the essentials, such as clean water and food that has far too long gone underappreciated. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary efforts, and I applaud the Western Cape government for doing its utmost to meet the needs of our residents at this time. This province has and will go above and beyond its core functions to steady the cause of our people in the midst of a crisis, the likes of which we have not experienced before. Thus, with this disruption also came opportunity to embrace the uncertainty and learn new coping mechanisms to develop our areas for improvement, but also our strengths for even better, brighter shared futures. In this spirit, I would like to pay tribute to our essential service workers who have been at the coalface of this pandemic, who are forced to see the worst part of the pandemic and who yet overcome fear and uncertainty daily. These individuals emerge as the real heroes and heroines of our current time. The cashier, the nurse, our doctors, refuse workers, banking staff, police and security services, and all others working to keep us safe, fed and stable. We salute you. In this spirit, we have to remain encouraged because even though all vulnerabilities across the globe have been exposed, we will emerge stronger. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Botha. I now recognize the ANC. African National Congress, do you want to take up your opportunity for a member statement?
Thank you, Speaker. Good afternoon, everybody. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is inspiring others to move beyond it. This is a quote by Nelson Mandela. We must all appreciate the outstanding leadership our country President Cyril Ramaphosa has demonstrated with his cabinet during this time of proportional crisis of coronavirus. The words of the WHO echoes the sentiment as they applaud South African approach in bringing the disease under control, using what they term preparation, primary prevention, lockdown and surveillance. We must further welcome the 500 billion rand economic and social relief package announced by the President on Tuesday. Of that, 130 billion will be coming from the reprioritization of the current budget, and also through the Select Committee, we heard that the 2020 Division of Revenue Bill recognized that large reductions to previously announced estimates of budget transfers to provinces and municipalities had to be made while protecting funding for social services, provinces and municipalities. Our leadership gets to be tested during this time in service to our citizens as per the oath we all signed and pledged. We wish to call on more efforts from our provincial and local government to reconsider the current intervention regarding social relief towards a more responsive and fair distributive manner to distressed households. We further ask urgency in ensuring ease of access for SMMEs, spaza shops and informal traders be assisted by municipalities with speed. We further request more attention and human way of dealing with the homeless and vulnerable sectors of our citizens in the province. We actually call for Premier and his team to engage private sector in protecting the workers who place their lives and those of their families as human shields to enable our country to operate during the lockdown. The numbers we see in our province are worrisome, Speaker, and we call on establishing our own provincial network for a social accord that must bring our communities closer, our workers and private sector to the table in a transparent and equitable manner, and harness innovation in our response, especially in dealing with the increasing local transmissions. We shall be monitoring municipalities, ensure transparency and open themselves up to community.
Time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Nkondlo. I now recognize the DA. Is the
Mr.
Democratic
Speaker,
Alliance taking the opportunity?
Yes, Regan Allen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Welcome, Honorable Allen.
Thank you. On the 14th of April, the Democratic Alliance made a call to allow SARS to pay out the COVID-19 Temporary Employment Relief Scheme benefit. It is no secret that the UIF has a reputation for being inefficient as it faces insurmountable human, infrastructural, and IT-related challenges. The DA long ago warned that the UIF would be overwhelmed by the task of administering the COVID-19 benefit. Over last weekend, however, this realization seemed to have dawned on the Minister of Labour. Now, Speaker, I can paint a similar scenario when I consider policing in our country. The DA made a call for accredited neighbourhood watches and CPFs to be declared as an essential service, as our safety stakeholders are able to play a meaningful role towards curbing crime. However, with the weekend now approaching again, it is high time for our National Minister of Police to also have his own realization, as neighbourhood watches will be able to assist in keeping our schools safe, our community safer, and even help queues at shopping centres. If I just go back to Labour again, in last year we heard that UIF paid out over 800,000 claims over a period of 12 months. Of these claims, only 24,000 were made online, and with offices currently being closed, we knew that they were going to be swamped again. Back to policing again. If we can reveal, we can also reveal that the number of police reservists, for example, have dropped by 86% since 2010. This means that the number of police reservists have declined by a shocking, has declined to a shocking 8,909 from 63,000 9 years ago. I fail to understand how our national government has overseen such a dramatic decline in the number of police reservists. Speaker, I paint these two scenarios to echo and encourage a message of constructive political discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Allen. I now recognize the EFF.
Thank you, Speaker, and good afternoon to everyone. The Economic Freedom Fighters welcomes the decision of the Western Cape High Court to declare the eviction of people of Empolweni Informal Settlement as unlawful and ordered that their dwelling structures be returned and erected. This follows the action by the City of Cape Town's law enforcement unit acting under the order of the City of Cape Town, which without warning forcefully demolished the shacks occupied by the people of Empolweni and in the process destroyed their furniture and trampled on the food and their belongings. All this happened under the auspice of the DA-led Western Cape government that was armed with memorandum order from national government that there should be no evictions whatsoever in the entire country during the period of COVID-19 national lockdown. The DA-led Western Cape government has shown time and again that it has no regard for the plight of the poor, even in times of global disaster such as COVID-19 pandemic. Further, it has shown that it has no regard and is willing to violate the rules and regulations set by the country to administer and control the spread of the COVID-19. It is therefore comes as to no surprise why the entire Western Cape province is in such a disarray, with lootings and unlawfulness activities dominating the headlines in the province. It is because there is no leadership that is accountable in the first place, which with those who are charged and with leadership duties being the ones
you allow lawlessness. That's the reason.
That's not true.
The Economic Freedom Fighters hopes that the Western Cape Provincial Government has learned something from these recent events and will now engage with the national and local government spheres in trying to protect and look after all the people in the province, more especially the poor and the vulnerable as required by the Section 41 of the South African Constitution. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Makamba Poja. I would like to re-emphasize on the ruling that I made earlier. I've now realized again that once more there are members who are making remarks, and I hope that we don't sustain that because it's not going to be helpful as we proceed. May I recognize the Democratic Alliance?
Speaker, Honourable Speaker, in the past weeks, we have experienced a number of looting and attacks on essential service trucks in the Western Cape. The stoning and violence against these vehicles cannot be tolerated. Our law enforcement agencies must ensure strong action is taken against the perpetrators. Honourable Speaker, anyone responsible for these actions must be brought to book and prosecuted. Honourable Speaker, it must also be noted that there has been an inconsistency from the national government, which is seemingly turning a blind eye to CPFs operating in Gauteng, whilst other provinces, including the Western Cape, is prohibited from using neighbourhood watch teams. Speaker, if we put aside all differences, we will all surely agree that neighbourhood watch teams can play a pivotal role in assisting residents to adhere to the COVID-19 regulations. Neighbourhood watch teams is the eye and ears in our communities. They provide a further level of protection for all residents, highlighting greater visibility and likely to result in curbing incidences of violence and looting. Honourable Speaker, whilst we are facing incredibly unprecedented times, and it is understandable that residents feel desperate, we cannot tolerate any sort of criminal behaviour. Honourable Speaker, I would like to urge communities to immediately report illegal behaviour to the police and to continue to request for the inclusion of neighbourhood watches as we continue to work better together to win the fight against COVID-19. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Mitchell. I now recognize Good. Honourable Heron. It does appear that Good is not taking up the opportunity. I will now proceed.
Sorry, Speaker.
Honourable Heron.
Can I start
Welcome,
again?
Honourable Heron. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Thank you. Speaker, the coronavirus has presented challenges that we never envisaged and pose questions to which we don't have all the answers. But we do know that unprecedented crises require unprecedented responses. Business as usual is consigned to the trash heap, and an urgent demand arises for leadership that is pragmatic, informed, agile, fair, and compassionate. The most critical factor for our fundamentally unequal society as we entered this lockdown was the ability to feed the most vulnerable people. But while families were starving at home and a food crisis was emerging, we had a government more concerned with access to cigarettes. On the 2nd of April, I wrote to the Premier and to Ministers Mania, Mayer and Fritz, alerting them to 3 food crises: access to fresh food markets, informal food trading, and food relief. My letters were ignored. On the 6th of April, I again asked the Premier to address the critical scarcity of food in poor communities. This letter was also ignored. Farming was declared an essential service, but small-scale farmers lost access to fresh food markets because these were shut down, although they could have practiced the same social distancing and hygiene controls that supermarkets do. The penetration of supermarkets in low-income families is insufficient, with many families buying fresh food from informal traders. But informal trading was shut down, and when the regulations were changed, the Western Cape dragged its feet to comply. Given the role of informal trading in providing livelihoods and food, I expected the Premier and Minister Mania to jump in, but they didn't. Food relief is now the subject of scrutiny across the country, and it has come as no surprise that we are receiving reports of the manipulation of government food relief, with councillors using access to food for political purposes. Yesterday, during the COVID-19 committee meeting, I shared a voice note from elderly residents in District 6 being denied access to food because they're not DA. Elsewhere in the country, people are prejudiced because they're not ANC. I appeal to the Premier to ensure that politicians are not involved in the access to government food relief in any way whatsoever.
Your time is up. Thank you very much, Honourable Heron. I now recognize the ACDP, Honourable Christians.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you. Speaker, the ACDP in the Western Cape regrets the fact that political parties like the DA and the ANC is using food parcels to write up members for their respective parties. Our people are hungry and vulnerable. It is brought under our attention that ward councillors are targeting the most vulnerable, passing them by because they do not belong to their respective party. Now, Speaker, this is contrary what the Premier, his cabinet and departments are doing and do want to achieve. So from the ACDP side, we want the Premier and the MEC for Social Development to investigate these matters and these allegations. We get it on a daily basis. Just this morning, somebody phoned again to say they were denied food parcels because they don't belong to the DA. So we, as the ACDP, request the Premier and the Minister to look at these allegations and report back to the House. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Christian. I now recognize the African National Congress.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The ANC is extremely appalled by the inhuman condition that people are exposed to in the Belben and Strandfontein shelter. During visit to the sites, we witnessed the gross violation and disregard of COVID-19 regulation by government. There is no social distancing and there are poor hygienic practices as people do not wash or sanitize their hands before meals. The law enforcement officers and medical staff deployed do not have adequate PPE and are forced to buy own sanitizers. The ANC calls for Strandfontein shelter to be closed down, were supported by reports commissioned by Doctors Without Borders and South African Human Rights Commission, which described the site as more of a prison than a place of safety, as well as a health hazard and potential hotspot for COVID-19 and tuberculosis infection. Over and above this, there are gender issues that need to be addressed, which resulted in a reported rape case. The ANC reiterates its calls for the Strandfontein site to be closed down immediately. The provincial government must ensure that poor people are treated with dignity and to respect. Homeless people in Hesikwa and Stellenbosch do not have accommodation. In Drakenstein municipality, there is a serious shortage of mattresses in the town hall and Tucson Center. The ANC also welcomes the additional food relief and increased grant as announced by the President on Tuesday. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Bagu Force. I now recognize the Democratic Alliance. Will the DA take up their opportunity? All right, so there's no one from the DA.
Honorable Maseko.
Is Honorable Maseko on the line? Thank you. I now recognize FF Plus. Honorable Murray.
Speaker, the lack of urgency and slow pace by SASSA and the Western Cape government in reacting to the demands for food by the poor is becoming a powder keg just waiting to be lit. This has placed our society on a very dangerous path from an initial revolt to the possibility of our own Arab Spring, as predicted by Maletsi Mbeki, brother of the former President Thabo Mbeki. The Freedom Front Plus therefore demands that an urgent bipartisan procedure is to be formulated by leaders of all the political parties in the Western Cape to address this situation. Speaker, over many centuries, churches and mosques have played a major role in the socio-economic upliftment lives of both colored, especially colored and black communities. They are credible institutions, far more than is the case with most NGOs and NPOs, kept family records for ages, decades, from birth to death of families. They should be called on to identify families and individuals who are in dire need for food security caused by the coronavirus and unemployment. We might have a revolution of our hands if we handle this thing poorly. I am sounding a warning, very serious warning.
Thank you, Honorable Murray. I now recognize, in the absence of Al Jama, I recognize the DA. Will the DA take up their opportunity? With the absence of the DA member to take up the opportunity, in terms of Rule 146, subsection 1 of the rules, I now recognize one member of the executive to respond if they so wish to take up the opportunity.
Thank you, Speaker.
You are welcome, Honorable Matigizela.
Speaker, we are facing a very serious global pandemic and a national disaster. And I welcome the role that the opposition is playing in the Western Cape to work with the Western Cape government and the national government to deal with this crisis. But I do want to urge all the members of this House to do that within the spirit of ensuring that we assist the people instead of playing politics. I want to respond, Speaker, to some of the issues that have been raised here, so that when we talk about the spirit of intergovernmental relations and working together as members of the House, we must do that with sincerity, honesty, and honesty. On the issue of Embolweni, I think it must be said that the City of Cape Town honored the court ruling that was made, which clearly stated that people must not invade land. And that was further stated in the regulations that came out, that we must make sure that land invasion is something that is not allowed. But unfortunately, what we saw in Embolweni, with the assistance of one of the members of this House, is quite shameful. Where people who were evicted, and this was said by them, people who were evicted by their landlords ended up invading the land in Embolweni, which is against the regulations, which is of course against the court ruling. And when the city executed that court ruling, unfortunately, instead of working together, as some of the members of the opposition here have said, we then played politics. And what is very disturbing about that court ruling is that it is not applied the same in other provinces. We saw the same thing happening in KwaZulu-Natal. We saw the same thing happening in Gauteng, but the court rulings, they were completely different than the court ruling that we saw here. And as I'm talking to you now, Speaker, there's pandemonium in that particular community. Because instead of respecting the court ruling to erect 49 shacks, there are many people now who are erecting shacks there, and they are assisted by one of the members of this House. And we must be honest when we deal with this thing. And the last two things I want to say, Mr. Speaker, is that there are serious allegations that have been made here by both Member Heron and Member Christians. And I think people must not throw these accusations loosely to score cheap political points. I will be following up on these matters because it is important for us to know exactly who are these public representatives who are using politics in order to give food to people. And we must make sure that members do not mislead the House. I will be engaging these members so that they can give us the names of these people And if those members are not coming forward, we'll then have to lay charges against people for misleading the House. But lastly, Mr. Speaker, I do want to say that I thank all the members of the executive, the members of this legislature who have been working tirelessly in our communities to make sure that we assist the vulnerable communities, especially during this time. And I think the only way for us to be able to deal with this thing is to encourage people to respect the regulations that have been issued by the national government, because we, as the executive in the Western Cape, are also doing the same, working with the national government. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Matigizela. Honorable members, just to correct that, in terms of the rules that we ascended to as Parliament, we adopted the rules as we did towards the end of the previous term. So in the new term, we considered to the same rules. It is Rule 145 and subsection 6, where the executive gets 5 minutes so that they are able to respond, if they so wish, to the statements by members or provide clarity whichever way they so wish to do. That is how the rules, the new rules operate. Now we have reached the end of our meeting, and of course, that then concludes the House. I just want to say to the members, it has been a pleasant meeting, and also for all of us, we are learning how the new normal will be. And this is how it has affected us, and I've seen how progressive this platform has been in terms of allowing members to do oversight over the executive and hold the executive to account. And thank you very much for what you've done. The speaker is still on the floor. And having done what we've done is to really represent the people that have elected us into office and dare not fail them. Thank you very much, honorable members. I hear there's an honorable member who would like to say something. None. Thank you very much, honorable members. Now the House is adjourned, and that concludes the business of the day, and the secretary will now switch off the meeting. Thank you very much. Have a blessed evening. Thank you very much.
Point of order. Point of order.
Who's the point of order? Your line is terrible, honorable member.
Thank you very much. No, honorable.
The House is.
No, can I just say on a point of speaker, as you were concluding, you were informed that Honorable Maseko was connected and she was supposed to do a statement, and maybe you didn't see or you were not informed, but she did then come back online because she had been offline. So while you were concluding, my point of order was that Honorable Maseko rejoined, and I understand that she was supposed to do a statement. And as the ANC, we would really support the DA being given this opportunity, because it would be a real pity if she is not allowed.
The House has adjourned. Thank you very much, Honorable the Leader of the Opposition. I do sympathize with her as well. But in terms of the rules, we have adjourned the sitting, and that concludes the debate, and the House is adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a blessed evening.
Just